Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Schumaker Bliss, and I am so excited to be here to interview Lucy Pankhurst today. Hi, Lucy.
Hello. Thank you very much for inviting me to chat.
And Lucy and I have collaborated on a number of projects in the past. We worked on Luminaries, I think was our first
Yeah,
project, which is the
back in
euphonium.
2017.
Yeah, 2017, euphonium and piano, and then later euphonium and uh, wind ensemble, and then
Yeah.
later euphonium and brass band. Um, we've also collaborated on a piece called Ouroboros that the International Women's Brass Conference commissioned, and that was for 2017 as well.
Yeah.
And you just sent me another piece. I haven't gotten to it yet. I have it waiting on my practice queue. Um but I can't wait to get to that. And then today we are going to be talking about a piece called Ghosts of Industry that is going to be the first section test piece for NABBA this year. Yay. So, if you don't know Lucy, Lucy is a phenomenal composer. And I particularly like her work for its creativity. Things like putting foil in the piano to make it sound like a robot. Or your incredibly inventive ways of using particularly percussion to create these phenomenal effects. So I figured we'd talk a little bit about Lucy's background. I'll embarrass her a little bit because I know that she's quite a humble person, but she has accomplished quite a bit. Um, so Lucy, I first kind of started paying attention to your work and following your career in 2011 when you won the British Composer Award for your piece in Pitch Black. That was the first brass band piece to win a British Composer Award.
Yeah. In that category, it was the first, yeah, first brass band piece. And I was actually the first female to win in that section as well. So yeah, a few firsts there, but yeah.
That was super cool to follow. I remember reading the news article from Four Bars Rest and cheering you on from over here. um you went to the Royal Northern College of Music for your bachelor's, your master's, and your doctorate.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that.
Um, yeah, it's a it was all, none of it was really planned, which sounds a bit strange. So I was a tenor horn player. Um, so I only started playing when I was about 13. On my 13th birthday, randomly was just when my first lesson happened, purely by chance. I started learning at high school on a random whim, and the only brass instrument they had to give me was a tenor horn. So it's not like I chose it; it kind of chose me. But yeah, I absolutely loved it. So from that first lesson, it was kind of my thing. But in this area, weirdly, I'm in the northwest of England, which is, kind of brass band country, but there's no brass bands around here, or there certainly weren't at the time I was learning anyway. So brass bands were kind of a new thing for me when I went to the RNCM. I played a lot more in wind bands and got used to, transposing whatever part was needed. I'd kind of go sit on that seat and fill any gaps, just plug the gaps wherever they were. Um, so yeah, I just went to the RNCM, as I say, kind of by accident. I wasn't planning on applying for any music colleges, but the teacher that I had for my A-level exams at the time suggested that, why on earth aren't you? Because I played trombone as well. Um, but tenor horn was always my kind of first instrument, and so I had very limited options for where I could apply for. But a few years previous, the RNCM had started letting in brass band instruments. So I applied, went for the audition, and somehow got in. So it was a bit of a wild ride to start with, kind of a baptism of fire, from someone who had very, very limited bottom of the fourth section experience of playing in a brass band, and not for very long before I went to excuse me, before I went to college. It was wild because, there's players there like Owen Farr, um, Helen Tyler, as she was then, on baritone, Helen Harrelson, um, Dave Childs, Dave Thornton, John Doyle. There was, yeah, just all of these like amazing players that I was just surrounded by. And there's this little old me that's, doesn't know anything about what's going on. So yeah, my undergrad, I was a performer, which is great because I think as a writer, it kind of gives you a sense of what you're doing from the inside out, especially for a brass band, because a lot of composers find it a bit of a challenge and a bit of an unusual beast to to write for. Um, but yeah, I think that as I really value my time as a player because when I'm writing, I still think from that perspective. Even if it's not brass that I'm writing for. A lot of the stuff that I do tends to be for brass, but it doesn't really matter. I always try and think from the performer's perspective, not on purpose, just kind of it's my process, just how it happens. Um, and during my undergrad, I just got into composing and arranging music and things. It was never, again, that was never really a pathway I thought was going to be an option, or just, it certainly wasn't something that I aspired to. I just sort of chose the right, electives and modules that gave me the opportunity to do these things, then did a lot more of it in my own time, and it just sort of happened. So I stayed on straight after a 4-year undergrad to do a 2-year masters. Then went off into the big wide world for a little while, started teaching and things like that. And in that time, that's when I wrote In Pitch Black, which was the composer award piece. And yeah, I just wrote as much as I could, took on every opportunity that I could, and just wanted to take it that little bit further, and especially with brass band specifically.
Mhm.
So that's how I kind of pursued the PhD at the RNCM as well, because it was the best place, I think, for me, because it meant that I could still do everything else that I was doing. Because Manchester's not really far from where I am, and Adam Gorb was there, who was my master's supervisor, who was just amazing. He was, perfect for me because he's the sort of teacher, he doesn't try and specifically funnel you down a particular avenue. He lets you kind of develop your own voice rather than turning into, and you're not a carbon copy of Adam by the time you finish, which
Mhm.
can be the case sometimes. But yeah, he was great for me, the way that I work and the way my strange little brain works. So it was great to go back to him. And my secondary supervisor was Larry Gove, so it was very different. He's now actually the head of composition at the RNCM. This is his second year starting now, I think.
And
Um,
he's married to my
so
friend.
oh wow, small world.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Because Larry was he was doing an undergrad at the same time as me, but a few years above, I think. But as a composer, when I was a
Mhm.
little tenor horn player.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, between them, it was a really, really different perspective. And it was a really good experience. I got to do all kinds of crazy stuff. But it was my portfolio was just focused on the kind of contemporary application of the brass band, so using the traditional instruments in non-traditional ways. Um, and so I completed just as COVID hit. So yeah, it took a while before I actually graduated from that. But yeah, so that was a couple of years ago. And I'm still kind of involved at the RNCM because I do a little bit of teaching there now as well, on the academic side of things. Um So yeah, it's been a really good environment for me to sort of develop things. I like with the RNCM Festival of Brass as well, or Brass Band Festival, sorry, as it is now. That's I've had quite a few pieces played there over the years, and it's one of the few places where um slightly unusual pieces or music that isn't necessarily a test piece uh can get airtime, actually get performed, because the brass bands are so busy with everything else that they do.
Mhm.
Um it's quite special when you get a band that will take on an unusual project and really want to do something with it. And yeah, the festivals are a great opportunity for that to actually get some lesser played pieces performed. Um, so yeah, it's been great having that association. So it's nice to still be still be there after all these years. 24 years later.
Oh my
Good
goodness.
grief. What a terrifying realization.
I mean, we were in college when we were 2 years old, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's how that math works
Yeah,
out, right? So
definitely.
I was thinking when you were talking about getting into composition, you kind of talked about it as if you kind of stumbled upon it. Was there ever any moment that you were like, okay, like this really could be a thing for me? Because I'm thinking about someone who might be watching this interview and thinking, is composition, is becoming a composer an option for me? How do I know that this is something um, that I might want to go into?
Yeah, it's strange because I had limited experience of writing stuff for my like school exams. So for my well, it's over here it's GCSEs and A levels, then you
Mhm.
go to college. So like GCSEs are when you're 16, A levels when you're 18, and then university after that, if that's the route you choose to go down. So for those exams I had to do some composing. Um that's that was my my complete experience up to that point. And it was the pieces that I wrote for that were like completely kind of free because for various reasons the we ended up for both exams having to kind of cram in an awful lot of stuff in a short space of time because we had a teacher that was on long-term sick and things like that. So it was a bit of a unusual predicament really. But so I never got taught what to do. I was just told, okay, you got to write a piece, go and do it. You've got to it's got to be this length, and you've got to write a little bit about it. Yeah, just go and do it. So that's what I did. So the pieces might not be something that I'd write now. But yeah, I loved it. It was great. Had no idea what I was doing. Still don't, to be fair. Still do don't do things the right way, I don't think. But um yeah, so that was my first kind of introduction to it, which was just flung into it, and it seems to just be the way for me. um Accidentally fall into it. So I really enjoyed that. So I wrote one of the pieces I wrote about was it was actually we went on a trip with the school choir over to the Czech Republic. And while we were there, it's not very nice. We actually visited a concentration camp over there. It was a work camp. It was called Terezin. And it was quite a harrowing experience, when you're only like well, I'd be about 16, I think, at the time.
Mhm.
Um, and I think my way of sort of processing that was to write about it. So I wrote this horrific piece called Sin that it is quite horrible and harrowing and was thoroughly unpleasant to listen to. But it was me, as I say, processing it, getting my emotions sort of and my thoughts about it out in a way that I couldn't really verbally do.
Mhm.
So that was quite an interesting, not quite a light bulb moment, I don't think, but looking back it probably was, but at the time I didn't twig. Um and yeah, I think the way it sounds a bit dramatic, but the way I sort of think about it is that rather than having a specific light bulb moment, it feels like I'm kind of following a path, and the pathways that I've followed are little bits that have illuminated for me in some way.
Mhm.
Uh, so imagine just like, walking through a dark haunted forest, and all of a sudden you can see a little flickering light in the distance. I've just toddle off towards that little flickering light. Um, and that, it sounds dramatic, doesn't it? But that is how it feels. Especially retrospectively, thinking how things have evolved into what they are. That tends to be what I've done, rather than make wake up one day and make a decision. I want to be a composer. I want to do this. But like the first step was just, randomly one day I did actually wake up and decide I was going to play a brass instrument. There's no particular impetus behind that. It was just a random thing. Um, and then from that, I've just kind of followed followed the light, um, and just gone towards what felt right for me. So yeah, not exactly a career path, just a little twinkling path that felt like it was the way to go.
Well, I think that that's really important to talk about, because I think a lot of people feel like there's going to be some big, huge sign
Epiphany.
being held up,
Mhm.
like, this is what you should do, And in reality, it is
Yeah.
kind of like a negotiation and some accidental things that happen, and all of these things kind of come together. So I think it's really cool that you shared your story on how you became a composer and how you followed this path.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how this piece kind of came into being. Um, so I'm interviewing you, but I'm wondering if I should do the first little bit and then turn it
Yeah,
over
yeah, absolutely.
to you. um, because I think I accidentally, like, speaking of things just kind of happening. um, um, so I've been helping out NABBA in kind of in in picking some pieces, making the board aware of different pieces written by minority composers, so that they can make sure that there's enough diverse pieces that are kind of being considered for the different sections and for test pieces and stuff for NABBA. So um, I was kind of I after several years of doing that and kind of doing that research and finding these pieces that are out there, um, I thought at some point, um, I wanted either NABBA or me or someone to kind of put their finger on the scale a little bit and start commissioning new pieces. We have these phenomenal composers in the brass band world, that we've heard for generations now, and I wanted some new voices. And I was thinking about. I think at first I asked NABBA, um, have you considered commissioning a piece? Um, and they were like, well, I don't know if that's in the cards. And so I was like, okay. And I remember a moment where I'm like, be the change, Amy, be the change. So I'm like, I'm gonna reach out to one of my favorite composers, you, and ask, what would it take to make this happen? Um, I'm grateful that you kind of agreed to the project. And at that point, I was thinking, I'm going to ask various bands. I had a few brass bands who said that they would contribute and kind of make a sort of consortium. Um, and so I approached the biggest organization that I thought would help. First, I approached NABBA, who had just said that commissioning something might not be in the cards. And so I went back to NABBA and I said, can you contribute towards this project? and, like, and so they brought it to a committee, and they decided to take on the project. Yay! So, so, um, it's a kind of funny, just way things came into being. And it's funny how sometimes these things just happen. And maybe this is the point where I tell people, if you want to see something happen, if you want a piece to be created, just reach out to composers, because sometimes it's the right time to tackle a project. Sometimes something fits into their schedule. Sometimes maybe they want to write something that's in that genre as well. um, Sometimes things just line up, you know.
Absolutely.
And I think this is one of those cases where everything just kind of lined up. um, and so I passed it on to NABBA, and kind of sent my sent my project on. Do you want to pick it up from there on how this whole thing kind of happened?
Yeah, I mean, it's also worth pointing out that I've not written a test piece before, uh, which is out of choice. So it was quite a big decision for me to go, yeah, okay, I'll write a test piece. It's completely, as I say, completely my choice. I've had the opportunity to a couple of times, and it never really felt right for me. It's not something. It's if you're if you're a composer and you write for brass bands, it's like writing a test piece is, for most people, it's kind of the epitome. It's like, that's what you want to do, that's the aspiration. And it's just not something that appealed to me at all
Mhm.
in the past. For various reasons. I think again, some of it possibly comes from being a player. So a lot, I had too many occasions where prepping for a contest was, not always, but often, with various bands, various conductors, not always the same people, but just quite an unmusical experience. And I always found, without exception, uh my view of the whole thing was just completely different to everybody else's. So the bits that I enjoyed and that I thought were really inventive and just amazing, everyone else didn't. Let's just say that. um and the bits that everyone else enjoyed, I not so much. But yeah, I enjoyed playing music, and for me, preparing for a contest didn't always feel musical, which is a bit of a, uh I can't think of the word, but yeah, it's a bit of a weird thing to say, really. But I'm sure if you're a player that plays in brass bands, I'm almost certain that you'll have had some instance of that possibly happen to you before. As I say, it's not all the time, but it happened a bit too often for my experience.
Mhm.
Um, so I always said, if it was something that I was going to do, it had to be the right project, it had to be the right time. And yeah, and of course, when you approached me to see if it was something that I would consider, um it hadn't been on my mind at all recently. So it was a bit of a shock, but also thought, well, actually, yeah. Because without meaning to sound too corny, if I think if there'd be very few people that would ask me to write one, and I'd say yes, and you were certainly one of the only people.
Yay! I'm
um
honored.
Oh, no, but it was lovely to be asked, and it also, it felt like an opportunity so that I could write something that was quite, that was me in the piece,
Mhm.
so I didn't have to make it anything else or try to be anyone else. Or it was the piece. It's like, unapologetically, it's very me.
Mhm.
And I think, if for anyone that doesn't know my any other pieces that I've written, um I feel like sometimes I'm kind of a cross between a storyteller and maybe some sort of, I don't know, like if say like an artist. That sounds dreadful. I don't mean like, oh, such an artist, but like, I mean like a visual
Mhm.
artist.
Mhm.
So I kind of think in colours and washes and textures rather than chord, 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 chord. I don't, when I'm writing stuff, I don't think in chord progression. It's very linear and it's textural.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think of how things interweave rather than where it goes block by block.
Mhm.
Um, but a lot of the pieces that I write have some sort of extra musical stimuli to it. So if that's just some kind of story behind it, or um, that the music is based on something. So like I wrote it quite different, but I wrote a euphonium piece a few months ago for euphonium and electronics.
Mhm.
And that was based on rolling dice and sort of deducting I won't spend too much time on this, sorry, but like all of the pitches and things were basically kind of defined by these dice rolls.
Mhm.
And so there was something that not musical behind the music still,
Mhm.
even though the final output sounds quite abstract and things. That there was like a reason behind it, and there's also like it's called by truncation. So it's basically the music starts off with a cube, and then the edges of the cube are blunted, and then it becomes an eight-sided um
Mhm.
object, which, and then if you blunt those edges again, that becomes a cube again. And it's
Mhm.
the relationship between those numbers and those dimensions, and that's sort of where the music comes from. But a lot of the stuff I do is very narrative as well. And I found it actually quite hard to choose what to write about until I realized what it needed to be about, and then that was a light bulb moment for me. um because I had a few ideas that I started off, didn't get very far with any of them, and absolutely hated it and questioned every life decision I've ever made. Um, and then, yeah, all of a sudden, it's just like, well, of course, why am I not writing about this? Because it's been something that's been germinating in the back of my brain for quite a while. And also very much on my, because of, like, we'll talk about this in a little while, but because of recent things that are going on in my hometown. It was something that's very much been on my mind in the lead up to writing this as well. So it needed to happen. Uh, and it's yeah, so it was to begin with, it was quite a difficult process, as I say, because I think I put a lot of pressure on myself through not just steering clear of writing a test piece for so long.
Mhm.
And then the sudden realization of like, oh flipping heck, I've said I'll do it now. And is it can I do it? Is it the right decision? And yeah, just a lot of self-doubt, which I think every composer probably struggles with, and every performer as well,
It's part of the
in some
journey.
way or
Yeah.
other. Yeah, exactly. Um, but as I say, that the final outcome is something which is quite unapologetically me in more than one way, I think. Um, and yeah, I'm thankful for that, because I always felt that if I wrote a test piece, it'd be quite contrived and very much not me. And I think with this piece, even if I never write another test piece, uh, this is very Lucy. So that's
It
that's what I
absolutely,
wanted. So
it absolutely is 100% Lucy.
and
So,
hopefully people will enjoy it as well. Sorry, that seems like quite a self-centered thing, doesn't it? But yeah, I did have the players in mind when I wrote it, not just myself.
so let's talk about the actual locations and why you decided that you wanted to write about these landmarks and why you felt so strongly about bringing them to life through music.
Yeah, sure. So the piece is, it's essentially I suppose it's kind of like a sort of love letter to my hometown. So I was born in Liverpool, uh, but for the vast majority of my life, we moved to a place called Widnes when I was about 2 or 2.5. So most of my life has been spent in this place, because this is where I came back to once I'd finished at music college and things. And it's an industrial town, so it kind of appeared as a result of the Industrial Revolution. It was like at the heart of it. Um, at the heart of the chemical industry, I should say. So just because of where we are, it's slap bang in the middle between Liverpool and Manchester, on the banks of the River Mersey. So there's yeah, just it was the location of it was just brilliant for getting things out to those places and also getting things in from them as well, like the ports in Liverpool, because the Manchester Ship Canal runs alongside the Mersey right by us as well, and so it was just the prime location for that period of time. So as a result of that, there's been lots of interesting buildings and landmarks and just local history that I've been getting progressively more kind of obsessed with. I do that. I have like sometimes it's a fleeting obsession that I just need to know everything about it, and then it sort of it dwindles. But this has been an ongoing one, and I think it probably just is always going to be. And the, there's a one landmark in particular, which I'll show you a picture of in a minute, which I'm still quite upset that I never got to see. Because I've got a thing about bridges. I really like bridges. Amy knows this because you quite often send me a picture of an awesome bridge
Yes,
when you see
if I see a cool bridge, I take a picture and I send it to Lucy.
And yeah, so this the Transporter Bridge it was called, which is it was absolutely amazing, but it was like demolished 20 years before I was even born. So I missed out on that one, but it was I kind of got a little bit obsessed over that, and then everything kind of grew from there. And the recent thing, like I sort of alluded to earlier on, so that we've also got a decommissioned power station in the area, which has eight or had eight great big cooling towers, and you can see it for like miles around. And it's recently, well, towards the end of last year, I think it was December 2023, four of the big towers were actually demolished. And I weirdly had very mixed feelings about it. And I think that this piece has just got it's a little bit like, you know, I was saying about Terrorzin, the piece that I wrote when I was 16. It's a similar kind of process, very different outcome, but a similar process. So it's a way for me to kind of deal with the thoughts and things that I have about this, and to just process it all. And and dramatically come to terms with, you know, the fact that this like massive landmark that's been there since I was little, that it's going to be gone very soon. Because wherever I was, like, you know, coming back from the RNCM and the holidays, or, you know, if I'd been working away coming home, you could see the towers from miles away. So it was always, you know, you knew as soon as you saw the towers, it was like, I'm nearly home. And you know, of once they're gone, is it still home? You know, it's odd. It's
Right.
like,
Yeah.
you know, it's strange. Of course, it is. It's the same place. You know, it's just towers. You shouldn't get an emotional attachment to it. But yeah, I just have weird sort of feelings about it. So that's what this piece was kind of born from. But I've got some pictures that I'll share just to give a bit of a sort of context to what these things are. So this is a map. It's an old map of what's called the Runcorn Gap, because there's actually a section in the music called the Runcorn Gap, which is where the bridges actually cross the Mersey and the Manchester Ship Canal. So this is the Runcorn Gap. So we have the on one side we have Widnes, which is where I am, and on the other side is a place called Runcorn. So that's this is the area that you'll see a lot of on in the pictures where the bridges actually cross over. So the first section of the piece is called Spike Island, and now Spike Island is really quite pretty. It's really lush, and it's sort of a haven for various wildlife and things like that, and it's very looked after. It very much wasn't in the Industrial Revolution, so we had places like this. So there's actually a great picture of this particular image which says greetings from the smoke. And yeah, it's a bit of a standing joke even now when people talk about Widnes. It's like, oh, a bit like, Springfield off The Simpsons. Like expected to see mutated fish in the water and things. But yeah, it took a long time to undo the damage that was done in this period. So that this is some of the factories and things that were built on the site just on the edge of the River Mersey. So this is Spike Island as we see it in at the start of the piece. So it starts off very murky, very we emerge through the smoke as if we're sort of looking overhead, and it's these kind of images that I'm trying to kind of evoke through that. So yeah, very very industrial, very dirty looking, but the actual processes that were going on at the time, and it was very important for that period of time. The development of the chemical industry and things like that. So we had soap works and chemical works and iron works as well, I think. But yeah, there was lots of things going on. So this, just you can see just in the background there, we have all the factories and lots of houses here that were built mainly for the workers. And this structure here is one of the bridges. So that the section in the music, which is called the Runcorn Gap, this is one of the bridges in it. So this is the Ethel Fleda Bridge, which was built just at the end of the 19th century. And it's a railway bridge. At the time, and still now actually, it was the biggest bridge of its kind, and it's still one of the biggest of its age. And it's a huge bridge. It has these massive arches.
That really puts it into perspective.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it? I do like that one. And this is the bridge as it was on its own. So you can see it's also got like sort of looks a bit like a castle at the edges. So it's called the Ethel Fleda Bridge because where it actually touches the land on the Runcorn side of the Mersey was supposedly where Princess Ethel Fleda had her fortification built there. So when she was can't remember what her exact title was, but she was like the ruler of Mercia at that time, several centuries ago. And that was one of the things I was thinking about writing of at the time, which before I decided, in the early stages this was. So that's where this bridge got its name. And this is the bridge here with these gentlemen walking across. So the railway lines are just on the far right. And the thing on the left is the bridge I was talking about before. This is the transporter bridge, which I've never seen, and I'm very sad about it. So yeah, I did not take this photograph. I hope that's obvious. So yeah, this is the transporter bridge. So you can see there's a sort of chariot in the middle there. It's called the gondola, which is suspended by wires. And it was steam powered. And basically people got on one side and then it shuffled off across the Mersey and landed again on the other side. So there weren't many like this, and this was one of the sort of last surviving ones. I think there's one up in the northeast which is very similar that still functions. That's just a close up of one end of the bridge. But it was so this was built, I think it was finished around 1905, and this is the with the gondola in the middle, next to the Ethel Fleda. So they were the two main bridges at the time. So it could take foot traffic and I think is it this next one? Sorry, this one here. You can see it's actually got a horse on it. So to begin with, it was mainly foot traffic, but big enough to take a horse and cart and sort of larger things. And eventually cars were going across as well. But it very quickly it was too slow to get across. And that there was just more demand than it could take. So that's a more recent one. But I think that was maybe 1960 that's taken from. So another bridge was then built in between these two bridges, which is now called the Silver Jubilee Bridge. So this is it, the arch there that's in the process of being built. So the Ethel Fleda is just visible on that side there, this archway in the middle. And there's the gondola just dangling. You can see the wires. So these three bridges were just so um striking. They
Mhm.
were actually only stood together side by side for a matter of months
Mhm.
before the transporter was demolished in 1961. Um, so it's yeah, it was quite a striking image. Just either any of those three bridges, I think, are quite striking and unique looking and very close to the buildings, as you can see. And this is the Athelflaeder there on the right.
Mhm.
So this is a modern picture of what it looks like now without the transporter bridge there. Yeah, quite striking. And this is the approach to where the transporter bridge would have been. So that would have
Oh,
eventually
okay.
led on to the gondola. Um, so again, as time went on, there was just more demand for a new bridge. So this again, much more recently now, this is the building of the new bridge, which is the Mersey Gateway Bridge, also featured in the piece. And this is what the final thing looks like. So it's all shiny and new, very different to the other bridges, but
Mhm.
again, quite visually striking.
Mhm.
Um, and you can see just off to the left, right, the next picture, I think we can see it there. That's actually the power station, the Fiddler's Ferry power station that was talking about before with the towers. This was taken about 2008, I think. So all the towers are still there and still functioning. Um, so that they're the bridges, and I'll talk a little bit more about how they're represented later on. But they again they're so visually striking. So again, when they're just like
Mhm.
iconic landmarks for the area, but also personally to me. So it's it's one of the things that means I'm home if I see any of
Yeah.
those bridges, or when you're going over them. You're either on your way back home, or you'll be seeing them again soon, kind of thing. Um, the next section is called the Bleach Packers, which might seem a bit bizarre. So this is an image of a bleach packer, which was a really, really dangerous job. So you can see there's virtually no skin showing at all, because
Mhm.
it was just so hazardous, and
Mhm.
the life expectancy of someone doing this job, actually making the bleach and moving it around in the part of a huge part of the chemical industry at that time.
Mhm.
The life expectancy was not very high. So, if the workers were in the pub at the end of the day and the bleach packers came in, everyone would just buy them a drink because, yeah, they were doing the job that no one else wanted to do. So it's quite, yeah, quite a tragic sort of, um, yeah, thing to think about, really. So the section called the bleach packers is sort of it's like in memoriam, I suppose.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so not just specifically to the bleach packers themselves, but just to the way of life and the sacrifices that were made during
Mhm.
this time. Like, the birth of the chemical industry and the industrial revolution, just how dangerous things were to make things as they are now. Um, so that's just an image to show that the safety gear of the time,
Yeah.
what these people would have been, well, say people, it was men that did this job exclusively. Um, so that's the sort of things that they would have to wear in protection. The next section is called the Queen's Hall, and this is the Queen's Hall in its sort of original uh vision. So it was a Wesleyan chapel that was built for the workers, and it was an absolutely gorgeous building. But over the years, it actually was transformed into a, a multi-purpose hall. So all of my school concerts and things when I was at high school, first learning to play and in the school choir, they happened
Mhm.
here because we only had a very small hall at school.
Mhm.
And yeah, so we all traipsed over to the Queen's Hall to do our performances. So the first ever solo I played was in this building. And I actually lived quite near to it for quite a while when I came back from college, and it was a really, really famous venue. Looks very different from its previous incarnation, but it is the
Right.
same building. and the Beatles actually played there, and a lot of other famous bands. Um, so yeah, it was quite at the time quite an important building. But over the years, it just got into disrepair.
Mhm.
And whilst I was living just a few doors away from it, I had to watch it get
Oh.
demolished, which was horrible. Having to drive to work past this, almost brick by brick, seeing it come down when it was like such a an important part of my formative musical
Mhm.
life, I suppose. And then we have the towers. So this is the Fiddler's Ferry power station, which, as I said before, it's like wherever you go, you can see it from
Absolutely.
the local area. So it was 8 big cooling towers and then one large central tower. And yeah, you can see it from miles around. It's just absolutely huge. So this, I should say before, all of this greenery here, this is what Spike Island looks like now. So that's
Oh,
where all of the smoke and chimneys were. So quite a difference now, but
quite different. Yes.
yeah. And this is what it looked like when the first 4 came down. This is a few hours after it actually happened. So yeah, quite sad looking. Um, but these towers just felt like they're such a strong representation of the area for me. They had to be in the
Hmm.
piece somewhere.
Yeah.
And then this is the last thing that's in the piece, which is it's a very old it's a gas light. It's actually been converted, so I've got another picture. So it was at some point converted to electric, but it just stands there. Again, this is something that I have to drive past a few times a week, and it's not very well cared for or loved. It just seems to have been left there to just fall apart.
Hmm.
Um, and it feels like quite sadly representative of a lot of things to me
Hmm.
in the area. So that the very last moment of the piece features this in my head. So that's what it would have looked like um at the time when it was first made, all
Hmm.
shiny and new. But yeah, this poor thing here, in my mind, that the last moment in the piece, which is tuned percussion,
Hmm.
just a play a chord, and that is this light suddenly just sort of firing and illuminating, um, as a kind of representing hope for some sort of you know looking after our heritage kind of thing, and not just rubbing everything out and destroying it. Um, so yeah, so from this, it's sort of like a light in the darkness is what I'm trying to do right at the end of the piece. Um, so that's all of the things that are in the piece somewhere that are all represented. Um, yeah. So hopefully that gives people a bit of a be able to visualize where I'm coming from with their moments in the piece.
Yeah, I think
Hopefully.
this was really interesting seeing the actual pictures of all of these locations. And I think a lot of us can relate to the general idea of our childhood home,
Mm.
and pieces of it going away. I mean, I know I grew up in a factory town, and the factory shut down. And so we
Mm.
have a huge factory in the middle of the city. And we too have a huge smokestack, and it says Hoover really big because I grew up right next to the Hoover Company. There's one in London and one in North Canton, Ohio. And so we have this vacant, humongous factory, and everyone's kind of
Wow.
wondering what's going to happen to this. So I think a lot of people have some sort of um, some sort of connection to something like this, and so I hope
Mm.
people through this piece can kind of can connect with their feelings of where they came from in their past, and remembering their own home communities. So let's talk about you're so much of a storyteller in your music so frequently, and I just had a flash of in Luminaries where Hatshepsut, there's a Hatshepsut movement, and in the wind ensemble arrangement you had all of the percussion hit something loud right at the beginning. And somebody said that they swore Hatshepsut was going to come down the center aisle. You're so good as a storyteller. So we saw these locations. How you kind of said a little bit about the gaslight. What are some other ways that you portrayed these locations in the music?
There's a few things. There are some I've tried to include as much as I could without being uh overly annoying about these things. I've tried to
Too
include as,
literal.
yeah, I've tried to include as much as I can in the program notes of the score as well. So
Mhm.
hopefully this just kind of clarifies things a little bit, maybe. But there's a few things which are obvious, I think, and then others which maybe not so much. So yeah, the final note of the piece, like we said, it's starting at the end, which is a bit silly, but yeah, the final note just represents um the gas lamp just suddenly turning on. Um, so it's there's so much change going on in the world and so much looking forwards. I think it's quite important to also not forget what's happened and um yeah, it's just as important to know where you've come from as to where you're going.
Mhm.
And yeah, to just sort of bit preserve that memory, I suppose, in some way. So for me, it's as I said, it's like this sort of um hope in the darkness kind of thing,
Mhm.
which is this illumination at the end. So yeah, I think it might be a little bit. A lot of people may not be expecting the ending that this piece has. It's not all crash bang wallop and explosions. We have some of that, but just not at the end. It's very almost like kind of ethereal, I suppose. And delicate at the end and mysterious and yeah, quiet, very quiet. Yeah. Uh, just yeah, it seemed it fitted with the piece for me, but I think it might be a bit of a surprise for some people because there's not many instances of a quiet ending for a test piece, I suppose. But to go back to the start again, so there's the image of Spike Island, as I said at the when we were looking at the pictures, it's supposed to be looking through the gloom and through the smoke. We kind of everything slowly emerges from it. So it's all very dark, muddy chords, and we've got the what's it called? Super Bowl beater that's being dragged across the timp at that point. Um so on the surface of the timpani. What it actually does is create a really unusual sound. It almost sounds like vocalization or groaning. It's a very strange sound, and that's intentional. So it's supposed to sound sort of like almost ghostly because
Mhm.
we're essentially looking at the ghosts of industry as it's called are these elements that are no longer there. We see sort of the final vestige of certain things like that lamp at the end, and there's some of the towers are still there, and we have some of the bridges and parts of where what would have led on to the original transporter bridge, and it's sort of like these ghosts that are left behind, and that is what that's kind of supposed to sound like. It's this ghostly effect, but also um for people that aren't expecting that sound, it'll be like, whoa, where's that coming from? It's supposed to be unsettling and give that same sort of feeling as it might have been to look just try and see through the smog. It's like really uncertain and yeah, unusual sound. Um, so as well as that, we've got quite a bit going on in percussion. So we've got the tubular bells, tam tam, and the glockenspiel, which the sounds that they make, it's supposed to sound like machinery, and the like the chains of shift, like bell sounds, sirens going off. And the muted trombone glissandi, that's supposed to be sirens in the distance and things as well. I think the most can I get a picture of this up? The most visual thing is part of the score that actually visually shows the bridges. So it's this bit here at letter H. So we've got a few things going on. So I think the bit in the middle is quite obvious. So there's one bridge. There we go. So that's the Silver Jubilee Bridge in the middle there, just the big archway. And then above that, we've got the three kind of pylons, or there's almost like a sail shape of the new bridge, the Mersey Gateway Bridge there. And this bit here with the gaps in between the sort of punctuating chords, that's supposed to show the archways of the Ethelfleda. So we've got the three remaining bridges at this point there on the page. So the back row cornets there with the trills, the overlapping trills. So it's supposed to just be like a continuous line, just breathe wherever you need to and dovetail it between you. That's supposed to be like the shimmering of the water between the bridges. And similarly, the vibraphone ostinato pattern that's going on there, that's a similar sort of thing. It's the movement of the water. And the glockenspiel chords there, they line up perfectly, they should do, with
Theoretically.
yes, the top of this like arpeggiated passage there. So the highest note that the soprano has lines up with the bing of the glock, and that is supposed to be these lights at the top of the bridge.
Cool.
Yeah. So and it's in lost it. Has it gone? There we go. So we've got these octaves, and that's to show the two sort of main lights that's on the bridge. So that's what that is. That both bridges actually have got lots of lights on them, and it can change colour. I don't know why they've done it, but it's very exciting. And for different events, they have different colours, or if it's particularly if there's an awareness day going on, they change the colour for those. So yeah, that's the most sort of obvious visual representation going on in the piece. And in excuse me, the other bridge, the transporter bridge, kind of has a section of its own. So we have lots of like quick moving, florid euphonium business going on for that. That's just like people hurrying around. And
I'm totally
we've also
biased
got
on that, but I'm excited.
yeah, and we've got like the sort of air sounds from some of the instruments, and a tap capacitor to give sort of the mechanical movement, and the rushing air of the steam supposed to sound like. And have I missed anything there? Oh, so that section, the Runcorn Gap section, is 2.5 minutes, which is the time it took for the gondola to get from one side of the bridge to the other. So it's quite important that's one thing to point out in general is there's quite a lot of metric modulations between sections. A lot of it revolves around crotchet equals 60. So it's like the passage of time, which is obviously important with this piece because we're looking back at history and heritage. So at the beginning we go from 60 to 144. So it's like a quintuplet becomes just crotchet quaver, straight quavers. So I think for conductors that's something to really be careful with, because if one of the one tempo isn't quite right, then it's not going to translate properly to the next section. So that's got to be carefully considered, I think, especially the sort of first few sections. The last two were a little bit more free, and there's a little bit more movement to it, but there's quite a lot of metric modulations that go on. The Queen's Hall is a bit that I think maybe in need of a bit of explanation, but when we first hear that, there's a lot of muted cornet things going on. So the idea for this whole section is to show the different lives and different kind of personalities that the building had. So we start off with this muted cornet line going on, and it's supposed to sound like an old record player, playing some kind of tinny guitar things, like sort of, from the Beatles, or from that era.
Mhm.
Um, and then on top of that, we get little bits of other things. So there's little snippets of a hymn tune that I've written to go with this. And there was also, for a few years, there was a brass band contest that was held there. Um, Ages ago, this is obviously, but so there's like sort of, a stereotypical bom 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 kind of bass line going on, but it's all at different times, so it's supposed to be overlapping
Mhm.
meters and keys and things going on. And at some point, the the sound of the record actually sticks, and it keeps going and keeps going, gets to the same place until we get this sort of bang to knock it back into action again. I think it's at N. And then things finally start moving again, and we see the full hymn tune appears in the horns at letter O,
Mhm.
with other crazy business going on around it. So that section actually finishes. One of the percussionists has got to smash a mark tree. So by that, that's actually when, the sad times I had to drive past when it was being demolished. My final memory of seeing it before it was just completely flattened, when I was driving to work one morning, was there was half a building, and dangling from the right on the edge of that building was a glitter ball, that was in the center of the main hall, and obviously, they used it for dances and
Mhm.
things like that, and it was just really, just dangling there, really precarious, uh really sad, and just spinning and just hanging on for dear life. So yeah, the kind of smash sound on the mark tree, that's where it is. It's the poor little glitter ball clinging on for dear life before it falls to its demise. Um, yeah. And I think another thing, just there's quite a lot of detail in the the program notes in the score, as I say, about the importance of the section about the eight towers, like the intervals of um what that's about. So we have
Mhm.
eight of these sort of minor third jumps, which is supposed to be the eight towers represented there. And there's a little bit in the next section of settling dust, where we have a bass drum and a tenor drum, and it's four um notes played on each that are slightly out of sync with each other. And that's supposed to be like an echo of the four,
Mhm.
the eight towers falling. Um, because we actually watched, if the houses went in the way, we would be able to see them from where we live.
Mhm.
So we actually watched the demolition online, but it was really strange because we heard it and we felt it before we saw it
Oh,
online,
yeah. Yeah.
which was horrible. And that's what's happening there. So it's that
See.
slight delay between what's real
Mhm.
and, what you can see going on.
Mhm.
Um, and the settling dust from that is the muted cornets. So out of this huge explosion, we're just left with a few uh, of these very, very quiet muted cornet sounds, and that's what that's supposed to show. It's just the yeah, suddenly again we sort of emerge through the darkness and the gloom and the dust at the beginning, and then it's different sort of of lack of vision at the end. But again, we sort of were fighting to see through this dust, and as it clears, all we can see is this little gas lamp that eventually lights up again in the gloom. So yeah, I think that's possibly the main points that I can think of anyway.
That's been that's been super fun to listen to, and especially being so early in the preparation phase. I think it's going to be super fun uh to hear those things as we kind of put them together, and for the audience members to hear them when all of the first section bands play this at NABBA. It's our biggest section usually, and I think it'll be fantastic to hear all of the different interpretations of your piece.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you
I
so
hope I
much
hope I
for,
hope
yeah.
bands really enjoy working on it, because it's a little bit different, I think, and
Mhm.
hopefully seeing what on earth I'm going on about in the music, and where it's come from. Hopefully that helps visualize a little bit more, and see where the more seemingly random bits might be coming from.
Yeah, I think personally I hear little bits of Wilby's Revelation and little bits of Harrison's Dream and like the sound effects that are in there and stuff, and I don't know, it's gonna be fun to put it together. And I think everyone's gonna love hearing all of the different performances, as I said. And I've really enjoyed talking with you. When NABBA asked me if I would do this, I jumped on it. Absolutely. Um, so thank you so much for joining me today. And I hope that this kind of shines a light, huh?
Yay.
Oh, shines a light on your piece for both the players and the listeners.
No, thank you very much. It's been lovely to chat. And I hope the bands enjoy as well.